What's going on, y'all? Riley here, and today I'm going to be giving my first impressions on the new manga series, Zom 100 Bucket List of the Dead. So stay tuned. Alright, so like I said, we're looking at the first volume of Zom 100 from Hara Aso. You might recognize Hara Aso's name from a couple of other series. He has had one thing printed in English before this, and that was the Hide and Closer manga series. And then also he has a series, Alice in Borderland, which people may recognize because it has a popular Netflix title at the time. Zom 100 is a zombie series, and I've taken in a lot of zombie media over the years, whether it be from movies or video games, manga, comics, TV shows, what have you. I've definitely watched and played and read my fair share of zombie material. So going into something new like this, the first thing that comes to mind is that it really needs to set itself apart from everything else by doing something really interesting and individual instead of just playing out the same way that everything else does. You don't want to be boring in the sea of endless media of the same genre, basically. And fortunately, Zom 100 does a lot to kind of differentiate itself right off the bat in this first volume. The series starts by introducing us to Akira Tendo. Akira is a 24-year-old guy who has been in his office job for the past 3 years. And he's kind of grown to the point where he's so bored with life because of how repetitive and mundane it is. Every single day is just him waking up, going to work, coming home, going to sleep, and doing it all over again, over and over and over again. Now, with this, it kind of, in the opening, gives me the same vibes as the beginning of the movie Shaun of the Dead did from Edgar Wright. And if you're familiar with that movie, you probably know what I'm talking about, where Shaun, before the zombie outbreak happens, is walking around town and everyone's just kind of trudging along with their lives and everything's very repetitive. Everyone's just kind of in the groove of what they do all the time, and it's very low energy, very boring, very mundane. And then he wakes up the next day and everyone's zombies, but they're still doing the same thing. They're still making the same movements, they're still going down the same streets, but now they're undead. And it gave me that same vibe of that, you know, being caught up in the just rhythm of life and not feeling like you're actually doing anything worthwhile. But this series does take a turn from where Shaun of the Dead winds up becoming a typical kind of survival story just with the comedic tones to it. Zom 100 takes a completely different turn. Now, we see in the opening parts of the manga, Akira come outside and realize that everyone is zombies. And whereas you might expect the character to have that typical reaction that everyone else would in this situation, where they're frightened and worrying what they have to do to survive, where they're going to get food and all that stuff, Akira is really excited because all of a sudden he realizes, I don't have to go to work anymore. And that's the point in which this series really takes a turn into going into its own direction. When it shows you that this character is not going to be like the protagonists of any other zombie series that we're familiar with, or at least none of the very popular ones. And instead we're seeing this guy who cares more about breaking out of the humdrum everyday life that he's had for the past few years, and is trying to embrace the fact that now he doesn't have that same responsibility. And this leads towards a lot of comedic situations and a lot of juxtaposition between him and the other people that we wind up seeing in this world. Where, for instance, there's a scene where he wakes up one morning and realizes that he's run out of beer, and drinking beer is pretty much all he really planned to do for that day. So he jumps through the window of someone else's apartment and asks if they have any beer, while they're sitting there worrying about how they're going to continue surviving because they're running out of food or something like that. And so when they have no beer, he just says, oh, okay, I'll just run to the store and go get some stuff. He doesn't have that sense of, you know, survival. He doesn't have that urge to make sure that he makes it out alive, or that idea that the zombies are anything that are worth worrying about. He goes through the streets like no issue just to get to the 7-Eleven and buy his beer as if it was an average day, because that's what he wants to do. Towards the beginning of the series, I think the second chapter, we see him create the titular bucket list of the dead. His list of 100 things that he wants to do before he becomes a zombie. No longer is it something like 100 things I want to do before I die, but he's literally titling it 100 things to do before I become a zombie. And it's not these big and lofty ideas, at least not what we've seen from the bucket list. So it's not like, going to some far off lands or doing some big feat. It's stuff like having a chance to hang out with my best friend and admitting my feelings to a girl or something like that. It's very clear that Akira has no lofty expectations of himself in this post-apocalyptic world. He has no real drive for survival. He only has the drive to do these things that he feels that he missed out on in the past several years. Zom 100 in that way sets itself apart from other zombie media because it's not a story about survival. Zom 100 is a story about living. It's a story about living your life to the fullest before you don't have a chance to live your life anymore. And I think that's something really interesting. And like I said, it's something that's very different from most of the material that we see. Whereas most zombie comics or manga or TV shows or movies are all about these people trying to figure out how they're going to continue society, how they're going to continue living their lives while all of these things are breaking down around them, while these people are out there who want to eat their flesh or eat their brains. And he doesn't care about that whatsoever. He just wants to have as many good days in a row, taking advantage of the time that he has, because he realizes that he's lost 3 years of his life. And I think that that's something that a lot of us can relate to. A lot of us have these boring everyday office jobs where we've gotten to this repetition every day of just going in, doing our job, coming home, and living it over and over and over again. And I know that before I got out of my recent job about a year ago, I felt that same way. And you kind of get caught up in just that pattern, and you don't realize it until it's too late that you've wasted a lot of time and you've wasted a lot of your energy and a good chunk of your life in doing the same things every day when you could have been doing things that were more exciting and more enticing as far as things that move you forward in developing yourself as a person. So that's something that really kind of stood out to me. Now, as clever as the series is, it's also fantastic because it mixes a lot of really great action moments with a lot of comedic moments like the stuff that I've been talking about. We do get a lot of really gruesome looks at these people who have become these zombies or these ghouls and stuff as they're walking around the street. It's just funny because whereas typically you'd see someone who's trying to, fend off the zombies with a gun or a baseball bat or something like that, Akira is really not concerned with that, and we just see him kind of bobbing and weaving around these random monsters that are in the streets. But the illustrations of everything around him are really beautifully detailed. And I want to highlight that because it would be unfair to talk about this series and talk about how great it's written without talking about the beautiful illustrations from the artist Kotaro Takada. Now, I looked up Takada, and he hasn't done a ton of work before this, but it does have a few series that I don't believe have been translated into English. I really enjoyed this first volume. I think that this is something that is going to stand out as something very different. It's also going to be something that continues to be very entertaining as it goes on. So whenever I buy new first volumes, it's always something where I'm intrigued. It's always something where I am intrigued whether or not it's going to be good enough for me to want to stick with it in the long run. And usually I'll give a series 2 or 3 volumes before I've really made up my mind on it. But this is one of those titles that very quickly in that first volume, even within the first chapter, I knew that this was something that was not just going to be special, but was something that I was going to be enjoying so much that it could possibly make it onto my list of my favorite current ongoing manga as it goes forward. If you haven't checked out the series yet, I highly recommend it. If any of the stuff that I've said sounds good to you, keep in mind that it is mature. It does have some mature sequences in here with violence and otherwise material. So just keep that in mind in case you're looking at sharing it with younger audience, kids, your kids or your nieces and nephews or anything like that. I'd suggest reading through it before you hand it off, just in case you don't think it's appropriate material for them. But it is a really fun series nonetheless. If you haven't checked it out already, let me know in the comments down below if you plan on grabbing the first volume. If you already have checked out that first volume, let me know what you thought about it. If you agreed with me or if you disagreed with me, let me know in the comments down below. I'm really curious to see what everyone thought about this one. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you're new to my channel, thanks for spending the time with me. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll subscribe so you can see more content like this every single week. And if you've been around for a while, thanks for choosing to spend the time with me again. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.